Hello, hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome to the dark little corner of the internet we call Cryptic Corner, where we explore the unexplained, the supernatural, the paranormal and hidden, the mysterious, the alien, the accursed, and the forbidden. I am your host, Miss Bumblebee, and today we are going to be delving into something of an ancient mystery. Well, not really ancient. Well, I guess colloquially you could call it ancient. It starts in the 16th century, so not really ancient, but intriguing nonetheless, and old, and involving some famous people. Some recognizable names are going to come up in the topic for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me, though. And if you want to participate with this select little group of a live chat over here, join us on Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's about to change here in the Midwest. We're about to switch times tomorrow, and I fucking hate it. But join us tomorrow as well for, I guess this is for the live chat. Join us tomorrow for some flat Earth fun as well. So we're gonna make that a thing. Good morning, Dee, with Cryptic Corner, because tonight's audience is all about giants. You guys know I love giants, whether it's giant Bigfoot creatures or giants in the Bible, like Goliath or the Nephilim, whether it's Scandinavian Jotunheim, or not Jotunheim, is it the Jotunheim? Anyway, I may have that flipped, but the Finn McCool was like I used to have this book when I was a kid about Finn McCool. It was probably kind of Americanized and stripped of all its ferocity, because I know later reading the exploits of Finn McCool, which is who it's based on, it was pretty pretty brutal. So the idea that giants lived in the golden age of Europe and the Middle East and East Asia and all over the old world, giants, but they were long ago and far away, right? A legend of a forgotten time. That was until we discovered the New World. And with the New World came the prospect of discovering these lost race of giants in some hidden pocket of the world. And maybe that did happen in Patagonia. Let's find out. Let's go over here and have a peek. Now, I guess I always want to blow up the screen before I talk about who it is. So, this channel, but the channel doesn't matter because this isn't even their video. They're just mirroring it. It's, this channel is called Claw. And the funny thing is they got part 1 on this, but there's no part 2 that exists that I could find. So, and they actually have part 1 noted in the into the video. But again, this is from 2 years ago, right? We'll see what they have to say. It's a very small channel, 448 subscribers. But let's see what they got going on. Good morning, Giants fans. If you guys like Giants, put a, let's see, if you're subscribed, you could put a giant footprint like that in the side chat. But if you're not a channel member, that's okay. You don't have to be a channel member. You can put a, is there a regular footprint? Yeah, there's regular footprints too. Yeah, check that out. So yeah, if you want to see more giant content after this, definitely keep dropping these footprints into the side chat and let me know that you like covering giants. This is the first episode of Live from the Hive that we're not doing the creation watch here. So we'll jump right into sci-fails from Cryptic Corner. So just for my live chat to help you keep score. All right, let's go. Wow.
This is the Patagonian giant.
And I want to make sure that we see flatwaterflatearth.com presents Actually, let's go to that website too. I looked at it, but it's flat water, flat earth. Because that sounds like my kind of jam. It just takes you to their YouTube channel. Let's see. So do they have part 2 of the Patagonian Giants? I mean, we'll split it up even if they have it. No, they just have part 1 there too, I swear. Look, this is the original channel. Maybe I should watch it here. They have 122K subscribers, so I'll give the little channel the watch. I'll give this little guy here some watch. What do you, that seems nice, right? Instead of going to this flat water. They have a lot of videos though, so maybe we can give them some Tartarian Giants. I'm in here. I'm in love with this channel now. Ooh. What else do you got? Daniel in the Lion's Den. Here we go. Plane formation and destruction. Look at that. Look at these big weird continents. Off in the... So I guess, that can't be Australia. Ah, man. Anyway, there's some weird stuff out here, and I'm all about it. You guys know that. So, I hope you're here for more of this absolute nonsense coming out of these Tartarian corners of YouTube. All right, let's go.
Patagonian giants, like others, captured the European imagination for a very long time. The first mention of this race surfaced in the 1520s from the account of Antonio Pigafetta, the chronicler of Ferdinand Magellan's expedition. But one day, without anyone expecting it, we saw a giant who was on the shore, near today's Puerto San Julian, Argentina, quite naked, and who danced, leaped, and sang. And while he sang, he threw sand and dust on his head. Our Captain Magellan sent one of his men toward him, charging him to leap and sing like the other, in order to reach.
So, these little European guys, like average height for what this 1600s. Let's see, average height for a Spaniard in 1600s. Let's see. How tall were the Spaniards in the 1600s? Since your standards, and this is from UC Essay on Population History from UC Press. Okay, so it says, since by our standards, the Spaniards of that time were small men with an average height of perhaps 160 centimeters, 5 foot 3 inches on average, and weighed perhaps 60 kilograms or 132 pounds. Yeah. So, you have these tiny 5 foot 3 men running around, right? And they were exposed, and there were, probably people that were like 170 centimeters and whatnot, but among the crew, people who were taller than average. The standard Spaniard. We're going to use standard Spaniard heights classifications. It's funny because you think about just the average person from Europe at the time being like almost like 5'11" or something, and they really weren't. They weren't. Now, and that's not to put them down or anything. I'm not really obsessed with. I'm not Ron DeSantis here with like, oh man, Columbus should have put lifts in his shoes. I wonder if Marco Polo leaned forward like Trump when he spoke, so that his people thought he was taller. Trump stands on his tippy toes when he talks. It's so funny. Ron DeSantis with his ridiculous cowboy boots. But Why am I talking about that on? Because it's funny. That's why. Why am I talking about that on Cryptic Corner? But the these guys, so they're really short. So what they're considering a giant is subjective. Let's go on.
Reassure him and to show him friendship, which he did. Immediately, the man of the ship, dancing, led this giant to a small island where the captain awaited him. And when he was before us, he began to marvel and to be afraid, and he raised one finger upward, believing that we came from heaven, and he was so tall that the tallest of us...
I gotta ask though, right? You're a person on a ship, right? You're like work on this ship, and you're supposed to be taking this guy around the Horn of South America, and you see this naked man dancing on the beach, throwing dust on his head, right? Which was like a lot of the South American cultures did this dusting. Famously, was it the Incas or the it was the Incas, I think, that dusted their bodies with gold. But anyway, it was like a part of their culture. But think about it, if you're a guy on a ship and this is happening to you, and your captain's like, hey, go get naked and do that too, so that guy will come over here. So your ship captain just ordered you to strip naked and dance and throw dust on your head. Like, what?
Us only came up to his waist. Withal, he was well proportioned. The captain named the people of this sort Patagoni. The etymology of the word is unclear, but Patagonia came to mean land of the Bigfoot. Magellan seized two of the younger males as hostages to bring back.
And Patagonia is still that's still what it's named after, these giants. Isn't that fun? They named them after, they named the land after the folklore.
To Spain, but they got sick and died on the journey. Unbelievable. He stole two people to bring back, two giants, but they died.
It's fucked up.
100 years later.
That is fucked up. Yeah, that was the ancient world, though. Especially the might makes. This is what might make the world that might makes right brings us, right? It's where you can just, if you can overpower a group of people, you can freaking take them as slaves. That was just how it was back then. It's disgusting. And people are like, oh, this world accommodates the white man because it was built by a white man. There were other people building their own societies that may have been better, but your society was more destructive and destroyed them. I'm not saying that all these tribes and stuff in South America or North America or anywhere, Australia, that any of them were specifically. I'm not pinning down one and saying this society was better than Western culture, but we don't know because they never got a chance to advance to the state of Western culture because of colonialism. Wow, the land of Bigfoot, Patagonia. Yes, Patagonia is the land of Bigfoot.
In the world encompassed, London, 1628, the first detailed account of Sir Francis Drake's circumnavigation. The author, Drake's nephew of the same name, wrote, Magellan was not altogether deceived in naming them giants, for they generally differ from the common sort of men both in stature, bigness, and strength of body, as also in the hideousness of their voice. Yet they are nothing...
I wonder if that means they had like really deep voice. That's what I'm wondering.
...so monstrous or giant-like as they were reported, there being some English men as tall as the highest of any that we could see, but peradventure the Spaniards did not think that ever any Englishman would come thither to reprove them, and thereupon might presume the more boldly to lie. The name Pentagones 5 cubits, these 7 foot and a half, describing the full height, if not somewhat more, of the highest of them.
So right now we're talking about, again, Spanish units that were different than what was a Spanish unit to a modern foot. Old Spanish foot to a modern foot. Convert it for me. Old Spanish foot. I wanted it to just convert it for me. I don't want to have to. It's giving me formulas to convert it. I'm not doing all that. I'm not mathy. If somebody in the live chat wants to convert old Spanish foot to modern feet to see how tall these guys were. They're saying that they were approaching 10 foot, but it's in the old Spanish. So yeah.
But this is certain, that the Spanish cruelties there used, referring to Magellan's hostage-taking, have made them more monstrous in mind and manners than they are in body, and more inhospitable to deal with any strangers that shall come thereafter.
Well, yeah, you show up, and then you kidnap some of their kids, and you're like, why are they so hostile? Why are they? And the idea that these people could have had genetic disposition to like acromegaly or whatever, the giantism, the disease, the pituitary disease, that could have been prevalent in the population. Maybe that's a possibility. I'm not disputing that.
He reduced the height of the Patagonians from 10 feet to 7.5 feet, but was obviously more intent on discrediting the Spanish and blaming them for the monstrosity of the giants. Ironically, though, he was really confirming the basic facts. English sailor offering bread to a Patagonian woman giant. It's the front piece to the first Italian edition of John Byron's A Voyage Around the World in His Majesty's Ship the Dolphin.
You don't think that the people who drew these pictures were like witnesses, right? This is someone described the situation to them, and they're like, okay, I'll draw that. And like, I want you to draw me giving a biscuit or whatever, a roll to a couple of women that I only come up to their waist. That's like, and then they're like, okay, I'll draw that. And then this guy's like, oh, this is a realistic depiction of it.
Florence, 1768. In the 1700s, the myth was still alive.
That is true, too. Nutrition does play a big part in human growth. So, and again, you got to remember the Spanish at this time were, little people. Not little people, but they were like below 5'5" on average. They weren't a tall people. So someone like me, I would have been considered incredibly tall, and I'm only like 5'10". I would have been considered like not incredibly tall. I'd be considered for a woman, I would have been incredibly tall. I'd be like, oh man, that's a tall woman. But the Patagonians, if they averaged over 6 foot tall, between 6 foot and 6'5", even if that was their average, and there's populations today in certain parts of the world that are healthy enough to achieve those averages, mostly in the really prosperous parts of Northern Europe where people are super happy and healthy because they have socialism. But I keep going back into politics, so I'm going to jump back over to this video.
And entertaining Europeans. Horace Walpole, the English historian and Gothic novelist, published an account of the giants lately discovered in a letter to a friend in the country, following the return in 1766 of Captain John Byron, who had circumnavigated the world in the HMS Dolphin. Word leaked that the crew had seen 9-foot giants in South America. Byron's May docking and Walpole's July publication suggest the rapidity with which rumors passed along the London grapevine. In his 31-page pamphlet, Walpole satirizes the whole idea and facetiously suggests that a limited number of the giant women could be imported for the sake of mending our breed. The official account of Byron's voyage.
Import their giant women is for snoo snoo. They want snoo snoo. You guys know about snoo snoo, right? Don't miss out on the snoo snoo.
Voyage appearing in 1773 finally debunks it, but not without respecting the Patagonians' vertical features. So here's Byron's account. When we came within a little distance from the shore, we saw, as near as I can guess, about 500 people, some on foot, but the greater part on horseback. One of them, who afterwards appeared to be a chief, came towards me. He was of a gigantic stature, and seemed to realize the tales of monsters in a human shape. If I may judge of his height by the proportion of his stature to my own, it could not be much less than 7 feet. Mr. Cumming, one of Byron's officers, came up with the tobacco, a gift, and I could...
So, 7 feet. It's not unheard of. It's within the human capacity. Yeah. So just the fact that they were talking about bringing these native women back to the European nations to mend their breed so that we could be giants too. So that my ancestors, and if you're white, your ancestors too could get rid of us. Maybe they did, because we are taller than they were. Maybe that's why they're complaining, like, hey, we're only 5'3". Why do these guys get to be 6'7"?
Could not but smile at his astonishment, which I saw expressed in his countenance, upon perceiving himself, though 6 feet 2 inches high, become a pygmy among giants. For these people may indeed more properly be called giants than tall men.
Who was 6'2" tall?
Stature to my own, it could not be much less than 7 feet. Mr. Cumming, one of Byron's officers, came up with the tobacco, a gift, and I could not but smile at his astonishment, which I saw expressed in his countenance, upon perceiving himself, though 6 feet 2 inches high, become a pygmy among giants.
So you're saying that that he was 6'2" tall, and again, presumably the Spanish, old Spanish feet and inches is what they would have been using, which are, I want to say it's close to 9 inches, a Spanish foot, but I don't want to do the formulations.
For these people may indeed more properly be called giants than tall men, the shortest of whom were at least 4 inches taller. So in this portion...
So he just said right there that they're about 4 inches taller than this guy that they said was 6'1", right? So 4 inches taller than that, so you're talking 6'5", which is definitely a tall people. A giant people, though? Meh. Meh.
I'll be reading to you directly from an account of the voyages undertaken by the order of His Present Majesty for making discoveries in the Southern Hemisphere, and successively performed by Commodore Byron, Captain Wallace, Captain Carteret, and Captain Cook, in the Dolphin, the Swallow, and the...
I gotta say I love these old maps, though. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I love looking at old maps of the ancient world, or at least what people thought the ancient world looked like, right?
Endeavour, drawn up from the journals which were kept by these commanders and from the papers of Joseph Banks, Esquire. Voyages round the world. So I'm reading to you directly now from the general introduction. This cannot be...
Ooh, thank you for doing some calculations for me. AR, let me read this for you. Old Castilian units, including the pi, which is shown as 11.128 inches, while back then 6'2" was, Tubi, and you're absolutely right. The pi was like a foot. Okay, so the pi was 11.1 inches. So I guess it's not that much shorter than a modern foot, but still, shaving an inch off of every foot as you take a measurement, it's gonna have an impact. How tall would someone be if they were saying they were 6'2", but it was in this pi unit, right? That's the question. That's the question. So if he's 6'2", but it's in pies, how tall is he in real feet or modern feet?
Be done in an unbroken series when the complicated and multifarious objects of history are to be recorded. But as each of the narratives in this work is a single thread, the transactions of every day are set down in a regular succession and the time noted in the margin. Great care has been taken to make the charts and the nautical parts of the narrative coincide. If there should be any difference, which it is hoped will not be the case, the charts are to be confided in as of unquestionable authority. By the charts as well as by the narrative, especially by that on which the tracks of the several vessels are marked, it will be seen how far the existence or non-existence of a southern...
You don't see enough modern reconstructions of South American people with hats and headdresses like what they actually wore. The wraps and stuff that they actually wore that were unique and cultural, and they're just totally lost to history. The only place you see them is in old drawings and paintings and stuff of people trying to capture. Because most of these cultures in society are gone. We'll never see them again. Never know what they were like. If there's ruminant populations, they're mixed with other cultures, or they've integrated into Western culture, Hispanic society, and things like that. So we'll never know what exactly their ways of life were like completely. And this idea, the North American idea, like the Plains Indian, it really dominates the pop culture image of of the native people of the New World, when they were actually quite diverse and unique. These people down here, they use slings and bolas and stuff. They were fishermen. There's a group of natives that live down here that free dive into the ocean to collect the bounty of the sea, and they have unique lung capacities and such that really aid them in these ventures.
Continent is already ascertained, and what land has in the course of these voyages been first discovered. The charts also will at one view present any mistake which might arise from the same name having been given to different islands by the several commanders in these voyages, without the trouble of comparing the latitudes and longitudes assigned them in the narrative. As it is but a very few years since the existence of a race of men above the common stature upon the coast of Patagonia was the subject of eager dispute among all ranks of people in this country, I have brought together the whole of the evidence on the question, as I find it in a collection of voyages lately printed in France under the title of Histoire des Navigations aux Terres Australes. It must be acknowledged that the contrariety of the reports that have been made by ocular witnesses concerning
ocular witnesses. I love this old-timey terminology, but what are they hunting here? Is this supposed to be... So, I'm sorry, I'm like all captivated by the art. What is this guy? I didn't even know. It seems like it's like a wind god or something like that, but I can't be sure. This guy's running bare-assed, and presumably this is a... What could it be? I guess a maned wolf? Falkland Island wolf, maybe.
Contrariety of the reports that have been made by ocular witnesses concerning a fact easy to be determined does not deviate less from the common course of things than the gigantic stature of the people in question. It appears that during an 100 years, almost all navigators of whatever country agree in affirming the existence of a race of giants.
So, I'm just reading what Jeannie Bottle says here. It says, small spaces on a ship. Tall folks were not often on board for long voyages due to the size of the beds, and below deck was cramped. So small people were better suited for long journeys, and they probably needed less nutrition to sustain their body mass too. So that's probably true.
On the coast of Patagonia, and that during another century, the much greater number agree in denying this fact, treating their predecessors as idle fabulists, and imputing their reports either to the terror which the rude fierceness of a savage people inspired, or...
Yeah, and Tubi, and yes, we did look that up. I don't know if you were here at the beginning of this segment, but we did pull up to see what the average height of folks in Spain was at this time, and it was actually 5'3" in modern measurements. So for 6'2" would be like 5'8.5". So someone who was 6'2", considered tall, would actually be shorter than I am today. Thank you for converting that, AR. You are the MVP. You are the MVP of the show today. Cosmic Kyle in the house. Good to see ya. Do you believe in giants, Kyle? Or do you think that maybe like 6 foot people that average over 6 foot tall just look like giants to old Spanish explorers?
Or to the natural propensity of mankind to assume importance by pretending to have seen wonderful things. That men have a strange propensity to the marvelous cannot be denied.
That guy's having a bad day. Look at that.
Nor that fear naturally magnifies its object. But though it be allowed that the accounts of the Patagonians have in some instances been exaggerated, it is certain that all who have affirmed their stature to be gigantic were not under the influence of fear.
Is this the Straits of Magellan? Is this the Straits of Magellan we're looking at here?
Very strange that nations who have an hereditary hatred to each other and an acknowledged opposition of interest should agree in asserting an evident falsehood. In the first place, it is well known to have been an opinion...
I don't think it's a falsehood. I think it's just that they were short people seeing tall people and thinking they were giants. Like, not like super tall people, but people that averaged, again, maybe around 6 foot, between 6'2" and 6'5" in some way. Like real 6'2", though, not this... Not the pi 6'2", which is 5'8.5".
Long established, both in our ancient world and in America, that there was once a race of giants upon Earth who distinguished themselves by violence and guilt. Barbinet was told by the inhabitants of South America that a deluge having laid Peru under water, the Indians retired to the mountains till the flood should subside, and that when they came again down to the plain, they found there men of an enormous stature, who attacked them with great ferocity, killing many, and driving the rest to the caves of the...
Oh, we're gonna get biblical here. I kind of feel like it's gonna get biblical, but I got full nudity on the screen right now, and these people have a pet monkey. I just want to make sure that we understand that. So this is maybe like a medieval Dora and Diego kind of situation.
rocks, but that having continued in their hiding places many years, they saw in the air a young man who destroyed the giants by thunderbolts, and thus restored to them the possession of their country. His guides also showed him many marks upon a rock, which they said were impressed by the thunderbolts, and many bones of an extraordinary size, which they believed to be remains of the giants. But they did not pretend to know when the deluge happened. The Inca Garcilaso de la Vega, in his History of Peru, Pedro de Sieca, Chapter 52, Garcilaso, History of Peru, Book 9, Chapter 9, relates, according to a tradition universally received, a number of vessels or junks came to Point St. Helena with a company of giants on board.
So Port St. Helena, is that, are they talking about the St. Helena Island? Like the island of St. Helena?
Stature so enormous that the natives of the country were not higher than their knees, that their eyes were as broad as the bottom of a plate, and their limbs proportionably large, that some of them were naked, and others slightly covered with the skins of beasts, that when they came on shore they dug a pit of an astonishing depth in the rock, and each of them consuming as much provisions as would be sufficient for 50 men, the country was soon exhausted, and they were obliged to live upon fish, that they see...
So these giants showed up and ate all their food. I'm assuming they're talking about like this, at the port of St. Helena, the island. But it doesn't say natives, though, and I know St. Helena doesn't really have natives. It has a governor and like a colonizer, or colony. It's been colonized, but I don't think it ever had like a indigenous population. So maybe they're talking about someplace else.
Seized the women of the country, to whom their brutality was fatal, and afterwards giving themselves up to worse vices, the whole race was destroyed by fire from heaven, which, however, left their bones unconsumed, as a lasting memorial of divine vengeance. Bones of an amazing size are said to have been found in this country, and fragments of teeth, which, if they...
Bones of incredible size that that are dinosaur bones, maybe? Because I know that some of the biggest dinosaurs that have ever existed are freaking from South America, and from this region, actually. So, that's one of those things that makes you go, right? Oh.
They were whole, must have weighed half a pound. Those who wish to know all the particulars of these American traditions may satisfy their curiosity by reading Torquemada, Book 1, Chapter 13 and 14, where they will find that these fables are very similar to those relative to the same subject in other parts of the world. The bones said to have been the bones of giants which have been found in America, and which were shown at Mexico and other places in the year...
Oh, how long do you think it's going to take before these bones disappear in the Smithsonian like all these other giants?
Year 1550 are probably the bones of some animal unknown, and indeed nothing less than the site of such a race of human beings, or a...
Admiral Lord Nelson was 5 feet tall, says Jeannie Bottle. Thank you for doing these calculations for me, guys. You rock. I don't want to math in the morning. I'm trying to do a show.
An entire skeleton can be admitted as a proof of their existence. Turner, the naturalist, reports that in the year 1610 the thigh bone of a man was shown in London, who must have been of an enormous size. But this testimony is not decisive, though the...
100 years later, in A World Encompassed, the first detailed accounts of Sir Francis Drake, circumnavigation, the author, Drake's nephew of the same name, wrote, Magellan was altogether deceived in naming them giants, for they generally differ from the common sort of men, both in stature, bigness, strength of body, and also in hideousness of voice, but yet they are nothing so monstrous or giant-like as they were reported, there being some Englishmen as tall as the highest of any that we could see, but peradventure the Spaniards did not think that ever an Englishman would come thither to reprove them, and thereupon might presume the more boldly to lie the name Pentagones 5 cubits, viz. 7.5 feet, described the full height, but if not what more of the highest of them. But this is certain. The Spanish cruelties there used, referring to Magellan's hostage takings, may have made them more monstrous in the mind and manner than they are in body, and more inhospitable to deal with than with any stranger that shall come to thereafter.
Author adds that he had himself seen near the River Plata, upon the coast of Brazil, a race of giants who went stark naked, and that the hinder part of their heads was flat and not round, that the women had long black hair, as coarse as a horse's mane, that the men were excellent archers, and besides, their bow and arrows carried 2 massive balls or bullets, each fastened to one end of a thong, a weapon.
That's definitely look like bolas to me. Is that not what a bola is? That looks like a bola. Why is it a bullet?
Which they used with great dexterity and force, either by striking with it or throwing it like a stone from a sling. One of these giants, he says, was 12 feet high, but acknowledges that he saw no others.
12 feet high, so that we gotta calculate that in, but I don't know if we're to the point now where we're talking about Sir Francis Drake's travels, and I think the English foot was actually, well, who are we on? Did they switch from Francis Drake?
They're so tall. Of this fact, there are other ocular witnesses who perhaps may be thought more worthy of credit. Among the Spaniards, Magellan, Loaifa, Sarmiento, and Nodal. Among the English, Cavendish, Hawkins, and Nivet. Among the Dutch, Sebald, De Noort, Lemaire, and Spilberg. And among the French, those who went on the expedition from Marseille.
He's just like name dropping people. He's like, oh yeah, these people said there were giants, without any kind of context or anything, just name dropping them.
And St. Malo's. Those who bear testimony to the contrary are Winter, the Dutch Admiral Hermite, Froger in De Jean's narrative, and Sir John Narborough. Winter, after having himself seen the inhabitants of Patagonia, says in direct terms that the accounts of there being giants are falsehoods.
Wait a minute, that's even said. This is Maya. Maya standing. Yeah, this is not Patagonia. This practice is not the Patagonian practice. These were the equatorial kingdoms were the ones who did the head binding and stuff.
Terms that the accounts of there being giants are falsehoods invented by the Spaniards, and it must be contested that the testimony of these navigators at least counterbalances the evidence on the other side, especially as they were best acquainted with the Strait of Magellan and the neighboring country. Such navigators as have visited this country and are silent with respect to the stature of the inhabitants, particularly Sir Francis Drake, must be considered as witnesses against the fact in question, for their silence is a proof that they saw nothing extraordinary. It must, however, be observed in the first place that the greater part of those who hold the affirmative in this question speak of people that inhabited the desert coast of Patagonia to the east and west, and that, on the contrary, those who hold the negative speak of those who inhabit the strait upon the sides of the utmost point of America to the north and south. The nations of these two districts are certainly not the same, and if the first have sometimes been seen in the strait, it cannot be thought strange, considering how short the distance is from Port St. Julian, which appears to be their ordinary habitation. Magellan and his people saw them there very often and trafficked with them sometimes on board his ships, and sometimes on shore. Nor was this all. He seized 2 of them, and kept them prisoners in his vessel.
Yeah, this is about the capture and everything.
One of whom was baptized some time before his death, and taught several words of his language to Pigafetta, who formed them into a little dictionary. These are facts, then, which nothing can be more positive or less subject to illusion. I affirm, says Nivet, that when I was at Port Desire, I measured several dead bodies that I found buried there, which were from 14 to 16 spans high, and saw tracks in the sand which must have been left by people of nearly the same stature. I have also frequently seen at
big footprints, yeah, big footprints, of course. Yeah, you gotta watch out for those ocular witnesses, Dr. Mordecai. They're the shiftiest kind of witnesses. No wonder they adopted the metric system. All these giants' measurements are a mess, right?
Brazil, one of the Patagonians who had been taken at Port St. Julian, and though he was but a youth, he measured no less than 13 spans. And our English prisoners at Brazil have assured me that they had seen many men of the same stature upon the coast of the strait. Sebald de Weert says that when he was in the strait, he saw giants of the same bulk, who tore up trees by the roots, that were a span in diameter with great facility. He also saw women that were gigantic, and others of the common.
So we're getting you're right. These measurements are all over the place. Now we've moved into spans. So we went from the Spanish foot, which is the pi, to presumably the English foot of the time, which I think is pretty close to the modern measurements. But Sir Francis Drake was 5 foot tall. Yes, so these people are tiny. These, and Sir Francis Drake was the British guy. Yeah, it was so. Yeah, seeing anybody over 6 foot tall would have just seemed outlandish to these folks. Like we were talking, AR pointed out earlier, the homeboy that was 5'8" was considered tall among the Spaniards.
In stature. Oliver de Noort reports that he saw savages of a gigantic stature at Port Desire, but does not call them giants, that he took 6 of them prisoners and carried them on board his ship, one of whom afterwards told him that the country was inhabited by many different nations.
Again with
4
the
of
Maya.
which were the ordinary stature, but that farther within the land, in a territory called Coin, there was a gigantic people distinguished by the name of Tyromenon, who were continually making war upon the other nations. Spielberg relates that he saw a man of an extraordinary stature upon the coast of Tierra del Fuego, but that the sepulchres which he found had received men of the common height. Eris Klatz, who is on board Lemaire's fleet in the character of commissary, a man well worthy of credit, declares that having visited the sepulchres which he discovered upon the coast of Patagonia, he found the bones of men who were between 10 and 11 feet high, which convinced him that the reports of former navigators were true. And here it must be confessed that the examination was made in cold blood, when it cannot be pretended that the object was magnified by fear. Some others, particularly Nodal.
Why did all of a sudden now does it have background music? Like out of nowhere, all of a sudden, boom, we have background music. What the hell? That threw me off so bad.
And Sir Richard Hawkins content themselves with saying that these savages were a head taller than the inhabitants of Europe, and of such a stature that the people on board their vessels called them giants.
When you say this, a span is the width of a human hand, is it like this? Is that a span? So it would be like what? My hand. But it's not consistent though. I have kind of big hands. It is maybe like 5 inches. Something like that.
The evidence of past times. We shall now consider that in the age in which we live. In 1704, the captains Harrington and Carman, who commanded 2 French vessels, one from St. Malo's and the other from Marseille, saw at one time 7 of these giants in Possession Bay. At another time 6, and at a third time they had an interview with a company of more than 400 men, part of whom were gigantic and part of the common stature. That Harrington and Carman reported this fact is attested by M. Frezier, superintendent of the fortifications.
And again, these head-binding skulls they keep showing have nothing to do with Patagonia. Just making that absolutely clear. They're just trying to like poison the well with the idea, the notion that these are the remains of the people. A span diagram in Wikipedia. You're the bee's knees.
Tanya, a man well known and universally esteemed. Frezier never saw any of these savages himself, but he says that being upon the coast of Chile, Don Pedro Molina, governor of the Isle of Chiloé, and many other eyewitnesses told him that there was at a considerable distance within the country an Indian nation called by their neighbors Caquohes, who sometimes came down to the Spanish settlements that were more than 9 feet high, and were the same race with the Patagonians who lived on the eastern coast, and have been mentioned in former relations. We are told by Rovino,
it blocked out his wiener.
the Spaniards who live upon the
even though it had it earlier in this same video, they had like a real person, like a real photograph of a native with his stuff just free hanging, and they didn't blur that out.
Coast in South America report that certain white Indians inhabit part of Chile, with whom they are always at war, that they are of an enormous bulk and stature, and that whenever they take a Spanish prisoner, they force up the breastbone, as they would the shell of a tortoise, and tear out his heart, Narborough, on the contrary, though he agrees that the Indians who inhabit the mountains near the Spanish settlements at Chile and perpetually commit hostilities against them are tall, expressly denies that their stature is gigantic.
And they just like, oh yeah, they just rip people in half. Did you hear that? They just rip them in half like a tortoise shell. Their rib cage like it's a tortoise shell, and get that heart out of there. Nom nom nom. What the hell?
He had often measured the skulls and the prints of the feet of the savages on the coast of the Strait of Magellan, which he says were of the common size. He had also several times seen numerous companies of them, even at Port St. Julian, and these he declares not to be taller or bigger than other men. While Narborough is certainly a credible witness and his evidence is directly to the point, it is confirmed by that of Le Hermite, who says
there he goes again.
that the people he saw upon the coast of Terra del Fuego, though they were robust and well proportioned, were not larger than the inhabitants of Europe. And lastly, M. de Gen bears testimony that none of the people he saw at Port Famine were 6 feet high. Those who diligently consider these different relations will find reason to believe that all the parties have spoken truth, each of them faithfully reporting what he saw, and therefore that the existence of a gigantic race in these parts is a real fact, not to be questioned merely because they were not seen by every mariner that visited the country. It appears to be well established that
well, again, we're not. The dispute isn't whether or not there was these populations in South America that were abnormally tall on average, especially compared to our, again, you got Sir Francis Drake, which was 5 foot tall. So, yeah. These folks seeing a native who is over 6 foot, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, it's a giant.
The inhabitants of the two borders of the strait are of the common stature, and that the race distinguished by the name of Patagonians made their constant residence upon the desert coasts, either in some miserable hovels in the depth of the woods, or in some caverns of the rocks, scarcely accessible to any but themselves. And it appears from the account of Oliver de Noort that when the strait began to be frequented by European vessels, they hid themselves as soon as the ships were in sight, which accounts both for their not being seen and for the recent marks of inhabitants upon a coast that appeared to be deserted. Perhaps the frequent appearance of our ships upon this coast at length determined them to quit it as a settled habitation, returning only at particular seasons of the year, and taking up their constant residence in the interior part of the country.
And that's completely reasonable in my opinion, that yeah, after decades of bad experiences with European travelers approaching them on the coast, they decided to move their settlement inland to avoid those types of conflicts, because they were kidnapping their people.
Lord Anson was of opinion that they resided statedly on the western side of the Cordillera Mountains, and visited the eastern side occasionally, but not often. So that if they have been rarely seen by the vessels which have touched at the coast of Patagonia for the last 100 years, the reason probably is that being, like other Indian nations, desirous to conceal themselves from strangers, they retired to the mountains. It is indeed to be regretted that no skeleton of these people has been brought into Europe, and it may at first seem strange that no such evidence of their uncommon stature should have been produced, as it is known that several of them who had been made prisoners by the commanders of European vessels died on board soon after they came into a hot climate. But the wonder will cease when it is considered that all mariners have a superstitious opinion that the compass will not travel if there is a dead body on board the vessel.
Well, to say that the superstition that all mariners have, I think is an overstatement. I don't know that that would be true for all mariners. People definitely did bring back remains of indigenous people to Europe during this period of time. They really did. I mean, it's not even disputed that they brought back both archaeological and fresh remains of indigenous populations, and live specimens, of course. So,
upon the whole, it may reasonably be presumed that the concurrent testimony of late navigators, particularly Commodore Byron, Captain Wallis, and Captain Carteret, gentlemen of unquestionable veracity who are still living, and who not only saw and conversed with these people but measured them, will put an end to all the doubts that have been hitherto entertained of their existence. Having thus brought together the whole of the evidence for and against a fact which has long been the object both of popular and philosophical curiosity, I shall not anticipate any opinion that the reader may form concerning future navigations in the track which has been described by any of the vessels whose voyages are here related, except that although it is the opinion of Commodore Byron, who spent 7 weeks and 2 days in passing through the Strait of Magellan, that it may be passed in 3 weeks at the proper season. Yet the passage cost Captain Wallis near 4 months, though he performed it precisely at the time recommended by the Commodore, having reached the eastern entrance about the middle of December. I cannot, however, dismiss my readers to the following narratives, without expressing the regret with which I have recorded the destruction of poor naked savages by our firearms in the course of these expeditions, when they endeavored to repress the invaders of their country. A regret which I am confident my readers will participate with me. This, however, appears to be an evil which, if discoveries of new countries are attempted, cannot...
So, I mean, they're talking about that they opened fire on these people that were... I mean, imagine they were throwing their slings at them, maybe arrows and perhaps some spears and stuff, trying to drive the invaders back, because they don't know. The only thing they're sure about is that these people in their big ships are kidnappers and killers.
Not be avoided. Resistance will always be made, and if those who resist are not overpowered, the attempt must be relinquished. It may perhaps be said that the expense of life upon these occasions is more than it is necessary to convince the natives that further contest is hopeless, and perhaps this may sometimes have been true. But it must be considered that if such expeditions are undertaken, the execution of them must be entrusted to persons not exempt from human frailty, to men who are liable to provocation by sudden injury, to unpremeditated violence, by sudden danger, to error by the defect of judgment or the strength of passion, and always disposed to transfer laws by which they are bound themselves to others who are not subject to their obligation, so that
say Inca, Egyptian, not Patagonian. These are not anything to do with Patagonia, just to be clear. This is a misrepresentation.
The excess thus produced is also an inevitable evil. If it should be said that supposing these mischiefs to be inevitable in attempting discoveries ought not to be attempted, it must be considered that upon the only principles on which this opinion can be supported...
More not Patagonian. They're just showing you, they just throw anything they want up on the screen and people just eat it up. So yep, that's a Patagonian giant skull.
The risk of life for advantages of the same kind with those proposed in discovering new countries is in every other...
More non-Patagonian skulls.
Their instance unlawful. If it is not...
Another non-Patagonian skull.
Lawful to put the life of an Indian in hazard by an attempt to examine the country in which he lives with a view to increase commerce or not.
What's that say up there at the top? Does that say Mayan? Again? Ugh.
It is not lawful to risk the life of our own people in carrying on commerce with countries already known. If it be said that the risk of life in our own people is voluntary, and that the Indian is brought into danger without his consent, the consequence will still follow, for it is universally agreed, at least upon the principles of Christianity, that men have no more right over their own lives than over the lives of others, and suicide being deemed the worst species of murder, a man must be proportionably criminal in exposing his own life for any purpose that would not justify his exposing the life of another. If the gratification of artificial wants or the increase of knowledge are justifiable causes for the risk of life, the landing by force on a newly discovered country in order to examine its produce may be justified.
We're going to look
not,
at some stone giants.
Exposes life for advantages of the same kind is unlawful. And by what trade or profession is not life exposed? Let us examine all the multitudes that art has employed, from the refiner who sweats at the furnace to the sedentary officer who grows pale at the loom. And perhaps none can be found in which life is not in some degree sacrificed.
So much pareidolia going on here, I can't get it.
To the artificial necessities of civil society. But will it therefore be said that civil society, to which this sacrifice is made, is for that reason a combination contrary to the great...
What are you implying with this one? Is this what I'm getting emotional about, Dr. Mordecai? This... Yeah.
Original principles of morality?
Some vagina caves! More
Will
faces.
It be said that to exercise the faculties which are the distinguishing characteristics of our nature is unnatural, and that being endowed with the various powers which in civil societies only can be brought into action, it was incongruous to the will of our Creator that any such society should be formed, and that it would be pleasing to Him if, still continuing in a savage state, these powers should lie torpid in our nature, like life in an embryo during the whole of our existence? This surely must appear extravagant and absurd in the highest degree, especially as it must be allowed that although commerce and arts in some instances expose life, in others they preserve it. They supply the wants of nature
Why are you so
without
blurry?
rapine and violence. And by
1080.
producing a common interest, they prevent the inhabitants of the same country from being divided into different clans, which among savages are almost perpetually
Yeah,
committing
if you Photoshop a dragon face onto the rocks, it looks like a dragon face. Who would have guessed?
hostilities against each other, with a ferocious cruelty which is not to be found where civil government and literary knowledge have ameliorated the manners of mankind. Upon the whole, therefore, it seems reasonable to conclude that the increase of knowledge and commerce are ultimately common.
Oh, we're doing some Roger
and that the
shit
loss of
right
life
here.
Which happens in the attempt is among the partial evils which terminate in general good.
We're going full Roger. Full Roger. The rocks were alive.
I have now only to request of such of my readers as may be disposed to censure me for not having attributed any of the critical escapes from danger that I have recorded to the particular interposition of Providence, that they would, in this particular, allow me the right of private judgment, which I claim with the greater confidence, as the very same principle which would have determined them to have done it, has determined me to the contrary. As I firmly believe the divine precept delivered by the author of Christianity, there is not a sparrow falls to the ground without my Father, and cannot admit the agency of chance in the government of the world. I must necessarily refer every event to one cause, as well the danger as the escape, as well the sufferings as the enjoyments of...
This should be this is a preparation. This is prep for your Howard review, Mark. This is your palate getting your taste. Switch this around. Like you're sampling a fine wine. What you're looking at right now, you should bring this to Howard. You should be like, Howard, look at these faces. Look at these faces in the rocks, Howard.
of life. And for this opinion I have, among other respectable authorities, that of the Bible. Shall we, says Job, receive good from the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? The Supreme Being is equally wise and benevolent in the dispensation of both evil and good, as means
Monkey
of
face!
affecting
Did you guys see the monkey face? Oh my gosh. Let's see that again.
wise and benevolent in the dispensation of
Yeah.
both evil and
Monkey!
good, as means of effecting ultimate purposes
goes so
worthy
fast.
of his ineffable perfections. So that whether we consider ourselves as Christians or philosophers, we must acknowledge that he deserves blessing, not more when he gives than when he takes away. If the fall of a sparrow, as well as its preservation, is imputed to providence, why not the fall as well as the preservation of a man? And why should we attribute providence only...
And none of those rock formations either have anything to do with the Patagonian giants. Just saying.
what appears to be good in its immediate effect, when we suppose that the whole concatenation of events, whether the preservation or destruction of particular parts, tends ultimately to the good of the whole? The same voice
Do they?
commissions the winds to plow up the deep, which at the appointed time rebukes them, saying, Peace, be still. If the adorable author and preserver of nature was such a being as Baal is represented to have been by the prophet, when he derided his
Baal.
worshippers, if he was sometimes on a journey and sometimes asleep, we might with propriety...
It'll never not be Baal in my brain, though, because I played Diablo. And yeah, if anybody just now tuning in, don't look at me. No, I don't have any makeup on this morning for a reason, but yeah.
say that a fire happened to break out, or a storm to rise, but that by the interposition of providence life was preserved, expressions which imply that the mischief had one origin and the remedy another. But such language certainly derogates from the honor of the great universal cause, who, acting through all duration and subsisting in all space, fills immensity with his presence and eternity with his power. It will perhaps be said that in particular instances evil necessarily results from that constitution of things which is best upon the whole, and that the providence occasionally interferes and supplies the defects of the constitution in these particulars. But this notion will appear not to be supported by those facts which are laid to be providential. It will always be found that providence interposes too late, and only moderates the mischief which it might have prevented. But who can suppose an extraordinary interposition of providence to supply particular defects in the constitution of nature, who sees those defects supplied but in part?
I don't know why it's bringing Peru up on the screen. What Peru has to do with Patagonia, I'm not sure. But we've gone off the rails on this video a long time ago, I promise. Dragons and stones and mushrooms. Yes, pareidolia has been turned up to 11 on this video, AR.
It is true that when the Endeavour was upon the rock of the coast of New Holland, the wind ceased, and that otherwise she must have been beaten to pieces. But either the subsiding of the wind was a mere natural event or not. If it was a natural...
It is weird that all these pictures of the South American people, they all have beards and stuff. 'Cause you don't really think about native populations in the not the United States, in the New World, in South America or North America, to be like a bearded population.
Event, providence is out of the question. At least we can with no more propriety say that providentially the wind ceased than that providentially the sun rose in the morning. If it was not a mere natural event, but produced by an extraordinary interposition, correcting a deficit in the constitution of nature tending to mischief, it will lie upon those who maintain the position to show why an extraordinary interposition did not take place rather to prevent the ship striking than to prevent her being beaten to pieces after she had struck. A very slight impulse upon the ship's course would have caused her to steer clear of the rock, and if all things were not equally easy to omnipotence, we should say that this might have been done with less difficulty than a calm could be produced by suspending the general laws of nature which had brought on the gale. I have, however, paid my homage to the Supreme Being, consonant to my own ideas of his agency.
The Supreme Being. Let's get that right out of the gate.
Perfections. And those who are of opinion that my notions are erroneous must allow that he who does what he thinks to be right and abstains from what he thinks to be wrong acquits himself equally of moral obligation.
So I think that the rock giants are different than the Patagonian giants in their folklore, in the Tartaria, young Earth, flat Earth movement. The Tartarians, I believe that they think that Tartaria was a kingdom of humans, was a kingdom of humans, and that there were giants, humans of large stature. But before that, like in primordial times, before the flood, that there were these giant stone giants and dragons and things like that. The primordial monsters of before God created the garden of those dark waters, those dark world of where before he said let there be light and stuff, these creatures dwelled, something like that.
Whether his opinions are false or true. And that's the end of the general introduction.
The general introduction. A 29-minute general introduction. All right, so that was flat water, flat earth. About the channel, welcome to Flat Water, Flat Earth. Now that we know much more about the true state of the earth, let's investigate further. After all knowledge is power, therefore let us be as wise as serpents, yet gentle as doves. Matthew 10:16, King James Version. God bless you, Glenn. So Glenn's the guy running this since 2016. And there haven't been anything put out in a year, but they put out links to other stuff in their... Ooh, including some Bigfoot stuff. There's Bigfoot stuff. That's from 2 years ago, though. I guess this is just this one time. Or 2 times. Yeah, look at this. Have you quit making videos? We love them. Have you lost the love? Pray you find the love in time. Love the time and energy to make more of your great videos. No, I'll be back eventually. Last year has been difficult, if not impossible, to put up more content. Most of what I'd want to share is banned and blocked already. I intend to come back and put up non-controversial videos here and to link to the more important content on another platform. God bless you. So yeah, I guess they probably ran into some censorship for Flat Earth, which is a thing that happens. And honestly, I'm not. This girl's not in favor of censoring flat earthers. I think we'll let them put their nonsense up here, and people like Logic and Planner Walker and Simon Dan, let them put up their videos, and people like that can knock them down. It's easy peasy and fun to watch. But what do you think about giants of the past? Do you think that the Patagonian giants were just tall people that these 5-foot Spanish invaders were impressed by because they were over 6 foot. Do you think that they were actually remnants of a lost civilization of a species of giants? Do you think that they were people that were actually had giantism? Maybe, or do you think their stories are totally made up? Let me know in the comments down below, because I'm interested in knowing what you guys have to say. And again, if you like talking about giants, give me one of these in the chat. Or, if you don't have the channel membership, you can do the Littlefoots. So we're going to have Bigfoots and Littlefoots. So show me some love out there. And yeah, the answer is always aliens. Of course it is, Maya. And we will be dealing with other stuff too. We're going to talk about the cone heads. Okay, that's going to come up. We're going to talk about the cone heads at some point. So don't worry about that. And we'll probably have a cryptid creature next week, though, because I kind of bouncing back and forth between doing creatures and concepts. But keep your eye out for that. If you're watching this on Friday night with my Cryptic Corner creeps out there, remember to hit the like and subscribe. Leave your comments. Tell me what you thought of the video. Tune in tomorrow morning for more Live from the Hive, where you can join this rambunctious elite class of human citizens over here in the Live from the Hive side chat, who yeah, Coneheads are from France. You got that right, Victoria. You can join us tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. And then Sundays, I've been doing my Creation Watch reviews with some fun guests. Last weekend, we had Ryan and Maya, and it was a good time. We talked about Halloween and some evil satanic practices and whatnot, because it was right before Halloween. Tomorrow, I'm getting double docked by Doc Dino and Dr. Tapioca Weasel. And I think we're going to do Admiral Bird. I had a video, but I want to make sure it's going to be quality enough to go through. Otherwise, I'll switch it to something else. But I do believe we're going to talk about Admiral Bird's reports from Antarctica. All right. So please remember to be kind. Take care, and we will see you next time.